Thank you so much for joining this webinar on careers in conservation and advice. My name is Becky Williams and I'm a Wildlife Officer at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. Um, Before we get properly started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're hoping to record this webinar, so if you haven't already and would like to turn your camera off, can you please do so now? Completely up to you. My colleague Rachel is going to be working behind the scenes tonight, making sure that technology is behaving itself. So if you get disconnected for any reason, please rejoin and Rachel will let you back in. And likewise, if you have any technical difficulties, you can email her or message on the chat. So I am very excited to introduce our amazing panel today. Because they've got such a variety of different skills and experiences to give you loads of advice on how to break into the conservation sector. So to give you a little bit of a flavour of what we're going to cover tonight, to start with, we'll have Jo Phillips, who will explain all the different pathways and roles within conservation and some of the job roles we've got at the Trust. We also have Emily Lake, who's going to give you all the tips and tricks for how to write an amazing cover letter and CV. We're also really pleased to have Alex Cunningham from Chester Zoo, who's going to be talking about how to smash a job interview and also give some insights from a different wildlife organisation, which will be great. And finally, we've got Rachael Nellist, who, while she's on all things tech, she'll also come on a bit later to share her story of how she changed careers and got into the green sector, which I'm sure many of you will have an appetite for. And then finally, I'll also be touching on traineeships, apprenticeships, volunteering. So we've got all that to look forward to. But most importantly, for those of you who stick about until the end, you'll have the chance to ask your burning questions to our expert panel, who I'm sure will be able to give you a range of advice. So with that in mind, if you have any specific questions throughout the webinar, please write them in the Q&A at the top of the screen, and I will read them to the panel later on so that we can get as many of your questions as possible. And finally, we'll also be sending you a resource pack and the recording after the webinar. So don't worry if you're not scribbling all notes down. So yes. So why are we here? Why are we doing this webinar? We're really hoping to encourage and help more people break into the environmental sector. And we thought that a webinar would be a really fantastic opportunity to share some top tips, some advice, some insights from industry professionals. And hopefully this session will give you a bit of a taste of what a career in the field could look like. When I shared the idea for this webinar, so many colleagues jumped at the chance to contribute, probably because, as many of you know, it's quite difficult to get started in this industry. But once you're in, there is such a lovely culture and a lovely shared goal of helping others to succeed. So I think everyone was really keen to help when we suggested this webinar. But my hope is that everyone leaves today with something useful, whether it's learning about a role that you like the sound of, maybe you get some ideas of how to ace an interview, or even just a boost in confidence to begin a job application. Let's make this webinar a step towards your future in the green sector. So first up, we have Jo Phillips, who's going to delve into some of the different roles within conservation, and give you all the top tips. So over to you, Jo.
Thanks very much, Becky, and hi everyone. On the slide now is kind of some of the things I'm going to go through. So I'll just give you a little bit about myself, my journey into the conservation sector and what I currently do. We'll have a look at the wide range of careers that are within the Wildlife Trust movement. And kind of throughout, as I go through those, I'll kind of touch upon things like training requirements, top tips and advice, and a little bit about greening other types of jobs, and that being a way to kind of achieve the goals and your interests and your passions as well, without perhaps working for a wildlife trust or another organisation like that. So as Becky said, it's certainly my experience is that it's a particular difficult sector to get in, although I feel like that is changing now with the kind of the ever-changing interest and politically and beyond in the sector. So my interest and passion in wildlife conservation. I kind of wanted to knew I wanted to get into that sector after being at university and speaking to researchers who were doing such great work on species, but then having the thought process that they might not be able to uh, do that work, or that work might not be applicable in 20, 30 years time if that species goes extinct. So I wanted to work to try and close the gap, and hence and hence my interest in becoming working in the conservation sector. So my pathway's been really varied. I did my degree was in zoology. I did a master's in wildlife conservation, um, but I've had a really varied pathway to the roles that I've been in within the Wildlife Trust. So I've worked abroad, working in kind of volunteering section of the conservation sector. I have trained to become a science teacher. I've worked as a in a school in another capacity as well, and yeah, and done lots and lots of different types of volunteering. So I guess that's kind of my first top tip and advice is I've taken a route to kind of have a holistic approach and kind of learn different elements of different roles and different skills, and gain different skills and knowledge in different kind of areas of the conservation sector. Now that might not be what you're after, but it certainly helped me in terms of to grow a wider understanding, and I can apply that in my role. But it's also allowed me to kind of hop between different roles, and that's given me a broader range of opportunities to seek a career and a job in the sector. So I've been with the Wildlife Trust movement for nearly 5 years now, working first at Shropshire Wildlife Trust. And now at Cheshire Wildlife Trust, about to move into my third role within the Cheshire Wildlife Trust. But I'm currently the Senior Science and Evidence Officer. I work in our evidence and planning team. So a lot of my work is to ensure that, as I said, that link between academia and science, make sure that conservation work is led by the evidence, and in particular, myself and my colleagues within our team work within policy and strategy as well. Um, so I will flick over to the next slide, which just on the screen right now shows you um, probably even more than this, but loads of the different types of roles that are within Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and it's a similar, it'll be a similar picture in other wildlife trusts across the country, and I'm sure within other organisations as well. And the reason I wanted to showcase this was really, um, I guess it's maybe a common misconception that you need to do a zoology degree, or you need to be you need to be a scientist, or you need to kind of know loads about plants or anything like that to work into the conservation sector. And really, this organisation works across so many different ways of conservation, and ultimately conservation is also about people as well, and then the way that we work as an organization, so making the sure the organization works well as well. So no matter, I guess the message here is, no matter what your background or your interest, you can find a role that's suitable for you within this sector. So I just kind of wanted to flag that you know you don't have to be some sort of specialist to and there's so much more opportunities for that. Um, so as part of that, obviously, because there's so many different roles, there's therefore so many different requirements and skill sets, and that these different roles require. So again, it's not a case of going when people say get volunteering experiences or things like that. I think again, a kind of a top tip that I would kind of suggest here is that you as I said, like I kind of like tested out different areas. But if there's a particular area that you're really interested in, as I've obviously put loads, but you put in the chat, then I feel like it's key to look at some of those roles, but maybe when they come up as job descriptions, to look into those and kind of assess what kind of skills, experience, and knowledge they kind of know. And if you feel like that's the pathway you want to go down, then tailor your experiences and tailor your volunteering, tailor your choices towards trying to develop those skills and knowledge. But I will caveat with the fact that whether you're a young person, whether you're an early career person, or whether you're switching careers, um, ultimately, if an employer is good at what they do, they shouldn't be expectant of you to know everything. I feel like, especially from personal experience, from recruiting people and also for myself, is that there's a lot of we on the previous slide talked about training requirements. Basically, there's a lot of scope within these organizations to train you up in very specific things, and also because you're early career, this it's not right to expect you know and have all those skills. That's the whole point of you. You're on the first step of the ladder to develop. So I wouldn't be put off if you saw from a job description loads of things that you didn't currently know how to do. I would say that you can start to build upon that by use that to build upon that by through your volunteering experience or things like that. And then but also, be mindful that that you should be able to receive those opportunities there. But what I would do in terms of kind of more top tips on that is, even if you don't know the particular skill or the knowledge that a job description for one of these suggests, and if you haven't had the chance or the opportunities to develop that in a volunteering role or another job role or something like that, then just showcasing in your application, but probably in particular in your interview. And I won't cover that too much because we're going to talk about that later with Alex. But I would kind of at least like do some reading behind it, show that you're at least knowledgeable to a certain extent, or you've kind of researched it in that sense. So you can bring in that element to the applications. Um, I'm going to switch to this slide here about transferable skills, and talk a little bit around this, and just the point almost to kind of follow on from what I just said there is, again, many of the skill sets you for the jobs that I've just shown you, then maybe you may be able to develop, or you may not have had the chance to develop before your job role. But again, I don't feel like that is something that there's a way around that in that sense. So if you I don't know, as an example, if you have never if you don't know like what plant species there are in the UK, or you've never ran a campaign, or you've never led a team of five, or whatever it is. If you've never done those specific elements because you've not had the opportunities to, because we all have busy lives, and you might have you're studying, or you've got another job. There are applicable skills to those, so that you can kind of pull out, and in terms of the transferable skills to those. So you could say, you could take out your experiences where you have, you've shown leadership in a different way, you've shown organization in a different way, you've researched something in the past. You can, utilize whatever experience it is. And this is where again, another top tip that I found, as I say, I've done various different things in terms of working and volunteering, and actually I found a lot when I've been applying for jobs that lots of the things I've talked about in terms of talking about my experiences and the skills I've developed have not really come from those really kind of conservation zoology type work experiences, or volunteering, or degrees or anything. It's come from those where I've had a job in retail, or where I might have coached a team, or those kind of things. So I think you can kind of apply those skill sets to the very specific skill sets. But what you will notice, and I've got a minute left, and I'm very conscious of trying to be on time here. So my final point is, what you will notice from job descriptions and the job world, and again certainly into the interviews again, is that the job descriptions are usually split into kind of professional skills and qualities and knowledge, and personal skills and qualities and knowledge, and that's where these things called transferable skills come in. Because ultimately employers are looking to see if you fit with the organization, to see if you can be a professional, if you can work in certain ways. And so a list here, and there's many more. And again, this is where you can pull these transferable skills out from other experiences that you've got. And I just wanted to flag really that these are really important, and maybe whether you want to weight it as equally as important as the others, maybe even more so. And again, if you can be thinking about these and thinking about all the different types that you're developing in your experiences or your volunteering roles, then they're going to become in real handy for when you apply for jobs in the sector. So I will stop there as I've reached my 10 minutes. And I believe we're just over to Becky now. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was brilliant. And yeah, you're bang on 10 minutes now. I'm very impressed. Yeah, yeah, so many great tips there. And I completely agree with what you're saying about how I think when we think about conservation careers, our mind goes to very outdoor focus, very hands-on, but there's just so much more to that. And I'm looking in the chat now, and there's lots of people doing like a marketing degree, and there's places for everyone in the green sector. It's not just those outdoorsy roles. So yeah, thank you so much, Joe. That was fantastic. We're just going to quickly take control. So this is just a really quick mention because we recently asked some staff at the trust what they'd like to see more of in applicants for the more nature recovery style roles. And our nature-based farm advisor shared this perspective. So one of the main things we're looking for in wildlife conservation students is for them to have a greater understanding of the farmed environment and the practical considerations required for delivering habitat interventions on non-owned land outside of nature reserves, as this is a very big part of what we do. And I thought this was really interesting because working with farmers and landowners is increasingly becoming a bigger part of some of the work we do. So having the ability to build trusting relationships and understanding of land management practices is really useful. So I thought just a quick insight there of sort of an insight from the trust. We're now going to hear from Emily Lake, who's going to give you all the tips and tricks and plenty of advice of how to write a great CV and cover letter. So the floor is yours, Emily. Emily, you might be on mute.
Oh no, sorry.
That's all
Hi
right.
everyone. Thanks, Becky. My name's Emily. I am the Senior Project Officer for the Estuary project. So I have a very unique role at the Trust. I'm hosted by them, but I work for 11 different organisations through the Tidal D Catchment Partnership. So if anyone has any questions at the end about partnership projects or working for different organisations, hopefully I can answer those. My background, however, is as a zookeeper and as a zoo educator. So I can also answer questions around that. And so I started as a zookeeper, moved into the education sector within zoos, and then now I've moved into communications and behaviour change campaigns. So I look at how to encourage people to modify some of their behaviours to reduce their impact on the environment. So for instance, that's things like our Clean Water Initiative, so working to reduce water pollution, and also our Coastal Recreational Disturbance Initiative, so reducing the impact of recreational activities on wildlife and habitats. So if anyone has any questions about those, please feel free to put them in the chat and put them in the Q&A, and I'll answer them at the end. But my main thing for tonight is CVs and cover letters. So we're going to look at CVs first. And one of my top tips is to source a template. So this can be through Microsoft Word if you have access to that, or some kind of open access word processing software. It just makes it really easy. It's basically, drag and drop, fill it in. It will structure it for you. And the other benefit to using a template links with my second point, which is to keep it concise. So if it's a template, it won't let you go outside of the kind of structure. And as you can see with the example here, for the for that person's work experience, they've used dot points to summarize each role. And I highly recommend that. I do that myself on my own CV. And I think that's really useful because it forces you to keep it short. So it helps you to keep it concise. Then in terms of the length of your CV, best practice at the moment is about 2 pages. That's for most sectors. I understand that there are a few sectors that might be a bit different, but particularly within something like conservation, 2 pages is fairly standard. And so this means that with a 2-page CV, I apply the 1 in, 1 out rule. So if you get a new job, you take the oldest one off the bottom to make room for the new one at the top. So that means that your experience that's listed on your CV is the most up-to-date, the most current, and the most relevant. And then finally, standard wording for references. So it used to be that you put your references, so people's details, at the end of your CV. That's not so much the case anymore. The standard wording for that section of your CV is usually something like references are available upon request. And the reason for that is that actually a lot of people will use different referees based on the job that they're applying for. And so that gives you the flexibility to change your references to suit the job that you're applying for. So as an example, the RSPB, they have an online portal for applying for jobs with them. And on their online portal, when you get to the reference section, you can enter as many references as you want, and you can label them as either personal, professional, or academic. So this means that if you're applying for example, a science or research job, you might want to add personal and academic references, compared to applying for something like a communications role where you might want to enter personal and professional references. So they're likely to ask for, all employers will ask for your most recent reference, most current from your current employer. But then you can tailor the rest of the references that you include to the job that you're applying for. So that was a very brief look at CVs. Let's move on to cover letters. So again, utilize what you have. The job description and the information within the job advert is a gift to you. So use that to structure your cover letter. What I tend to do is actually copy and paste the requirements out of the job description and put those in a Word document and almost fill it in from those, so that I know that when they come to read my cover letter or my personal statement, that I've addressed all of the requirements within that job description. Particularly if they break it down for you and they have essential and desirable qualities or characteristics or abilities within the job description. If you copy and paste those into a Word document and structure your cover letter around those, it means that you know that you've ticked all those boxes. But then also going back to what Joe was saying, you'll be able to see what you might want to work on, and in which case you can express in your cover letter or your personal statement that you would like to learn more about that thing. If you don't feel like you have enough experience in it, you can make it a positive within your cover letter and say that you want to expand your skills in that area. So the next point is more so linked with communications jobs, but however, communication skills are attractive to all employers. So it can be applied to any job within conservation. And my recommendation is to take the reader on a journey through your experience. Don't just expand your CV. So don't just take your CV and turn it into sentences and paragraphs. Take the reader through your career history and through your experience in a way that's exciting for them to read. What I would say is think about it from the hiring manager's point of view. So put yourself in their shoes. They have to read a lot of applications, and you want yours to stand out. So that then leads me on to my next point, which is be you. Don't write in a style that doesn't represent you, because when you get to interview for that role, you will struggle to maintain that when the nerves kick in. So, you know, be authentic, showcase who you are and why you want that position, because that will then help you, you know, when you get to interview. And then finally, keep it brief. So all employers are different. You might have a page limit. If it's a cover letter and a CV being sent via email, you're likely to have a page limit on that cover letter. If it's an online portal, for example, the RSPB, you're likely to have a word limit or even a character limit. A lot of employers now are putting character limits on personal statements within online applications, and that includes spaces as well. So be very careful, make sure you read the whole of the job description and all of the logistics within that, in terms of how to apply, so that you don't get to the final stages of submitting your application and find out that there's it's too long or too short. And then my other top tip in terms of length of cover letters is utilize acronyms for longer terms. So for example, I work for the Estuary project. It's got a very long name. So when I write ODE for the Estuary for the first time, I use the full title, Estuary, and then in brackets, I'll put ODE, capital ODE, as an acronym. And then so that from then on, within that document, I can use ODE and the reader will know what that means. And that way, if you are up against a character limit or a word limit, you can save yourself a few words or a few characters. And then I've kind of touched on these already. Avoid duplication. So don't just expand your CV, write a whole new document and bring it to life through your writing. Linked with that, get people to proofread your cover letters. So and people outside of the conservation sector. So whenever I write a cover letter, I get friends and family to read it, and then I get ex-colleagues and co-workers and things to read it, so that I'm getting both perspectives, outside perspective outside of conservation and then inside of conservation as well. And then, as I said, be very careful, follow the guidance, don't exceed the word limit. A lot of online portals won't actually let you paste in the personal statement if it's too long. It will reject it straight away. So make sure you read the instructions that are within the job description. And I think that's about it from me. But yeah, at the end, any questions about zoos, zoo education, communications or behaviour change campaigns, let me know. I will hand over now to Alex Cunningham from Chester Zoo.
Yeah, Alex, if you want to take control of the screen, Alex's Wi-Fi's been a bit dodgy earlier, so he might not have his camera on, but he is here.
Yep, hopefully you can all hear me.
Yeah.
You had to deal with looking at my mugshot rather than my pixelated face. But I've also got some pictures of me on the screen as well, so you should know what I look like. I'm sort of using myself as a little bit of a look into the different roles you could be doing when making a shift into conservation. I think that's kind of why I've been asked to speak. So my name's Alex Cunningham. I'm currently the Schools Engagement Officer. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to listen to everybody, and it's lovely to be invited. In a nutshell, Schools Engagement Officer, if you're not sure what that is, I'm working with young people, trying to connect them to nature, and in the hope of doing this, we'll hopefully be improving well-being and the school sites for biodiversity. So it's a job I absolutely love, but it's not a job that I always thought I would be doing. So I'm going to quickly run through some of the jobs I've done before this, before I finally settled on working in education, and then I'm going to quickly run through some interview stuff as well. It has been a bit of a ride. When I first started off, I really did not know what I wanted to do. I started working in retail while I was doing my studies, before finding myself as a dive assistant, where I would basically work to teach people how to dive while learning to dive myself. I worked for years in hospitality before going traveling and actually working in the tourism industry, where I was able to take people on tours and show them some amazing sights. Coming back to the country, I worked briefly in fundraising before finally finding the job that I really loved doing in zoo education. I think probably a similar story to what Emily was doing. She was a zoo ranger when I started, and I was a zoo ranger at some other zoos. If you're not sure what a zoo ranger is, if you've ever been to a zoo and you've seen those people in their brightly coloured polo shirts walking around, giving talks, sometimes with a strange artifact in their hands, you can go up to them, ask them questions, find out about things about the zoo. It's a great job. It's something I love doing, and I thought, right, education, that is going to be it for me. But then I started getting work in the schools team. Now, that was doing everything I loved doing as a zoo ranger, but I also got to go and work with schools and communities that maybe didn't have the opportunity to come and visit the zoo. So I've absolutely loved doing this. It's also given me some chances to go and work with schools internationally. So I was working with some of our partner projects out in India. So there's a picture of me working with one of the schools. The partners had asked us to come up with some games and activities to help them sort of talk around the issues of living alongside predators like tigers or leopards. So I've now moved away from the tigers. I'm working with more around foxes, still orange and fluffy, just a lot smaller. And I'm absolutely loving engaging the people who live and work close to Chester Zoo and talking about how amazing UK wildlife is. So I think I worked out that public engagement is what I like doing throughout all those different roles. Those transferable skills that Joe's mentioned at the beginning, those have been really useful in getting me where I am now. And I think connecting people to nature and the natural world is not something I only share, but also our wonderful team at in education at Chester Zoo. They also share this passion. There's a lovely photo of several members in the education team, as well as some of our partners and our volunteers. It's not just the education team at the zoo, though. There are so many different careers that are needed when we think about our mission of preventing extinction. So when we think about green careers, here are just a few of the ones that came to mind when I was putting together this PowerPoint. And I would love to spend a long time talking about every single one of them and how they all contribute to conservation and how you could get into all these different roles. But I did want to get into the interview side of things that we mentioned I was going to talk about. Now, I understand that some people will be coming into their first conservation career, so they might be interested in that side of things. But some people might be making a shift from one industry to another, kind of like what I did when I first started off at the zoo. So I'm going to very quickly fly through some of these, but if you do have more questions about any of them, do put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll try and get to them at the end. I also mentioned this point system that I put down the side. Now, this is not something that all jobs will use, but it's something that Chester Zoo uses in many of its roles. I've made a very basic one there, but a lot of the times when you're asked a question, although we don't say you need to have, know everything about the role, we do ask questions that we think are going to be very important to the role. And in those questions, we would like people to be excellent at them. So when you're asked something and you give a sort of a half answer, or you're giving sort of an idea around it, you might get a 2 or a 3. But if you really dive in and show that you know everything about that particular thing you've been asked about, you'll get a 5, and that's what you want to try and achieve. Going back to what Emily was saying about CV knowledge, please do try and familiarize yourself with your CV. If there is something that's piqued the interest of an interviewer, they might want to ask a bit more about it, or they might want to clarify something that they're not too sure about. But if you are not too clear on it, then that doesn't look good in the middle of the interview. Also, understand what the format of the interview is and the type of assessment. You might have a one-to-one interview. It's quite rare at Chester Zoo. You're more likely to go for a panel interview where there's several people asking you questions. If there is a role that's going to have lots and lots of applicants, like some of our seasonal jobs, you might be sent to an assessment centre, which is where you're going to have several stages through the interview process, where you might all be in one room with lots of other people interviewing for the same role. Or you might be going for a job that's completely practical and they're going to get you to trial something, see how you do, and assess you from there. But whatever it is, please look back at the interview questions that might be sent to you beforehand, or the interview brief that's been sent to you. Do that company research that Joe mentioned, really find out about what their current projects are, what their mission statement is, why are they so great. If I think about Chester Zoo at the moment, we're all in the mode of bringing in our Heart of Africa area. So this is what's on the forefront of many people's brains. And you might even be given an assigned task, maybe about one of those current projects. If you are given an assigned task, really cover everything that they've asked you to in that task. And if it has a time limit, please stick to that, which I'm also looking at my time limit and realizing I need to fire through this even quicker. Read the job advert. Have some examples ready to showcase how you meet those asks. If they say that they've got some strengths that they want you to demonstrate, make sure you have some examples. To do this, to help you out through a little bit more, I've got the STAR interview technique there. Now, this is something that maybe some of you are familiar with. If not, please look it up. There's loads of stuff on Google that tells you, how to use it, how to work yourself through it. But to give you a very quick run through, if you were answering a question, you would look at the situation, give a bit of context, background, but you don't need to give every single bit of information. You're trying to get to that task, the thing that you did, whether it's a challenge or a task or a goal, because then you can move on to the action of how you dealt with it, how you completed that task before giving the result, how it came to a conclusion, and linking this back to the situation. And if you follow that technique with every question you're answered, hopefully you've covered as many of those points to get that 5-point score. Now, I'm going to give a very basic question as an example. If I was thinking about, can you tell us why you applied for the role of whatever it is? I would make sure that I am covering why I want that particular role, but not just the role. I would say why I want to be in that department. I would want to say why I'm in that particular company. I would want to talk about what I want to do with that role. I would want to talk about where I'd like to take it in the future without moving into the territory of saying this is just a stepping stone and I actually want to do something else. Always feed back and say that this role, this job is really, really important to you, because that means that people are more likely to trust that you're going to stick it out. If you're thinking about those tasks and those situations, you're not entirely sure what I'm talking about, think about those top 3 successes that you have in your career, or maybe top 3 challenges, something that you've had to overcome. So you can then talk about positives and you can talk about negatives, but you can always spin them to say, this is the actions I took to get to that result. Now, I'd love to talk more about the actual interviews and the questions, but obviously I'm running out of time. So I'm just going to finish up with some of those things that you should do either in the interview or at the end of the interview. In the interview, please write down the questions or ask the interviewers to repeat them. I love it when people write down questions because it means that they're listening to the whole thing. Sometimes questions come in 2 parts. Maybe there'll be a beginning and an end and a follow-up. And some people fall into that trap of only answering the beginning or the end, not the whole thing. So please ask them to repeat it if you forget it, even in the middle of the question. Also have some questions ready for the interviewer as well. So when you get to the end of your interview, you can feed back and say, oh, I love this. I want to find out more about this. But basically always make sure that you're providing them a bit of insight into why you want the job through asking questions, whether this is, what are they looking for in the first 6 months of the role, or what could I do to progress and develop myself for similar roles? But make sure you're being yourself. Make sure that this job is right for you. If you don't really like the kind of things that they're saying, maybe it is best to not accept the job, but you best provide an explanation about why you're not accepting this. Now, on the other side, if you don't get the job, rejection is really hard, but any practice is really useful. Always ask for feedback, and don't fall into the trap again of thinking that you can't do something. A lot of people have the skills, but they think they need to know absolutely everything, kind of like what Joe was saying at the beginning. Even having a go, having a practice means that you have practice doing your CV, putting a cover letter in, you have practice going through that interview, and then writing down the questions they ask you, mean that if you're lucky enough to go back for a similar role or even the same role, then you'll have those ready to go. And you can always ask for feedback at the end of the session from those people that have been involved. I think I've definitely gone over my time, so I'm going to say thank you so much, and I'll pass on to our next speaker. But if you do have any more things that you want to ask me about zoos, interviews, education, then please drop them into the chat or the Q&A, or you can always send me a message on social media or email. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was brilliant. And thank you, Emily, as well, for all those top tips on CV writing. It's really interesting hearing what the process is like at Chester Zoo, because there's definitely some overlaps with the Cheshire Wildlife Trust process. So thank you so much for all those great tips. But yeah, so moving on. Next, we're going to have Rachael Nellist, who changed careers into the wildlife sector a few years ago. She's going to share her journey and explain a bit about how she made that switch and offer some advice for anyone considering a similar move. And I'm just going to set her screen up for her. There we go. Rachael, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so hi everyone, I am Rachael and I'm currently the Wildlife Manager at Cheshire Wildlife Trust. So I wanted to just briefly share my journey into wildlife conservation, because I always think it's quite interesting to hear the path that people took to get into their current job roles. And like many of my colleagues, I didn't follow a traditional path. So I hope my story alongside everyone else's tonight kind of shows how many different routes there are into this kind of work. So from a young age, I've always loved wildlife. Some of my best childhood memories are watching frogs in my grandma's garden and just generally spending time outdoors in nature. But I was also really interested in art when I was younger, especially photography. And growing up, I loved wildlife, but I wasn't sure how to turn that passion into a career. And at school, I was like unaware of the variety of careers in conservation. So I assumed it was all about practical roles like working on nature reserves. And that definitely influenced my choices when it came to deciding what to study at A levels and also university. So in the end, I decided to study photography at uni. But looking back, I realized like how tough it can be to make these major life decisions at such a young age. And then after university, after I graduated, I quickly realized that the main career options for photographers didn't really fit with what I was interested in. So, like wedding, fashion, and product photography didn't really appeal to me. So I ended up working in a cafe in Manchester for a few years, and it was a really great experience, but this is when I realized I wanted a career that connected with my love of nature. So I was living in Manchester, and I was feeling very disconnected from the greenery I'd grown up with in York. And at the same time, I noticed how much the natural world around me was changing. I started reading about the decline in wildlife, which kind of gave me the final push to look at a role in wildlife conservation. And that's when I came across a traineeship with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. And it was perfect. It was designed for people like me, who were passionate about wildlife but didn't have any direct conservation experience. And I was successful in getting a place on this traineeship, and this was definitely a turning point in my career. And over the year, I gained loads of hands-on experience in like practical skills like land management, ecology skills, communication skills, and community engagement skills as well. And one of the highlights from the traineeship was creating a project to engage young people in nature. And it really opened my eyes to how my creative skills could contribute to conservation. And it was the first time I really saw how like art could play a role in this field. So within this traineeship, for my self-led project, I started by brainstorming ideas by reading wildlife magazines like National Geographic and British Wildlife. But as someone with dyslexia, I found these particular magazines to have quite complex language and data and graphs, which were not the easiest to read. And this is what inspired me to create my own wildlife magazine, a more simple, accessible publication for anyone, like regardless of their knowledge of the environment and wildlife. And that is how Bumble magazine came about. And I started it within my traineeship, but I continued it for 3 years afterwards. And during that time, I learned a whole host of invaluable skills, such as marketing, communications, social media, and event planning. And we managed to get the magazine stocked in places like the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, independent bookshops, and even like the Tate Modern, which was pretty mind-blowing. And we received endorsements from people like David Attenborough and Chris Packham, which was a huge highlight of my career/life. And then after my traineeship, I landed my first paid role with the Conservation Volunteers, or TCV for short, in York. And what started as a fixed term contract, it was only supposed to be a 3-month fixed term contract, turned into a permanent position. So I was with TCV for about 2 years, and I worked on a community engagement project for them. And then in 2021, I joined Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and I've done a few different roles within the trust now, starting on another fixed term contract as well on a project in Stockport. And I'm now a wildlife manager. And my role involves working with the rest of the wildlife team to manage and grow the Wild Network, which is a community of volunteers, local groups and organisations who are supporting wildlife across Cheshire. And our role is to empower these people to take action for wildlife, whether through training, resources or advice. We're basically helping people to help wildlife themselves in their communities. But we will be sending more details on the Wild Network in the follow-up email too, if you'd like to find out more about that. So some final thoughts. I've learned that there's no single path into wildlife conservation, and there are so many different job role possibilities. I know we've already mentioned quite a lot of them earlier. And I would say now more than ever as well, there's definitely more opportunities now than when I first got into wildlife conservation. And it's a field that needs people from all walks of life, whether you're into communication, social media, community work, or even a different background. You don't need a wildlife conservation degree to get into the sector, although it can be helpful. So yeah, my main advice would be follow what you're passionate about. Like my colleagues have said previously, focus on your transferable skills. If you don't have much wildlife conservation experience, gain experience wherever you can. And don't give in to imposter syndrome. It's completely okay to not know everything about everything. And so yeah, that's it from me. Thank you for listening. I will hand back over to Becky.
Thank you so much, Rachael. That was brilliant. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to what Rachael was saying. And yeah, I think just if you're considering a career change, then go for it, because it's an amazing, rewarding sector. So thank you so much, Rachael. So where to go from here? So when it comes to starting a career in conservation, things like these on the screen, like apprenticeships, traineeships, and volunteering are really valuable, because they're very sort of hands-on opportunities. They'll help you build your skills, but they also help you connect with other professionals in the field. So organisations like local wildlife trusts, conservation NGOs, national parks, they often offer structured apprenticeships and traineeships tailored to conservation work. So I did a traineeship when I changed careers a few years ago, and it meant I got so much training, so many opportunities to shadow, to be mentored, which is just what you need when you're new to any sector. Another thing, so volunteering, which you can see on the screen, can also be a really great entry point, whether for a charity, a research project, or like a community group. Most charities depend on volunteers to help carry out some of their work. So there's this huge appreciation for volunteering as a whole in the sector, and something they like to hear about in interviews, especially if, for example, you're really into trees. So by volunteering with a friends of group that's protecting a woodland, it really shows that you practice what you preach. And there's such a range of community groups out there that you can get involved in. My top tip would be, if you join a smaller group, a smaller community group, the chances are you'll get so many more responsibilities, opportunities to learn, all these things that you can add to your CV. So most of the community groups include people, especially the community groups that we work with, they often include people who used to be biologists and scientists and allotment experts. So there's quite a nice opportunity to learn from these local experts in community groups. I'd say most community groups often need help with their social media presence. So there's lots of ways you can help without leaving the house. Another option, you could also join a youth-led group for a wildlife charity. I know that Chester Zoo has a youth board, and Lancaster Wildlife Trust has a youth council, both of which are designed to give young people more experiences. So maybe look for your local charities and see if they've got a youth board there. There's also nothing stopping you applying from becoming a trustee for a charity. I think that Bug Life are currently looking for a young trustee at the moment. So you could go down that route. And I think with any of these, I know a lot of you might be thinking, but Becky, I don't have time. I don't have the mental space or the finances to volunteer. And I could not agree more. Like, I completely get that. And I've been there, and it is really tough. However, I will say this, volunteering is far more affordable than a university degree, sadly, in this country. So if you're interested in finding out about what groups are local to you in Cheshire, feel free to drop me an email. I'll happily send you some groups that you could reach out to. But yeah, any of these on the screen will allow you to explore and experiment in different areas that you could go into. You know, don't hesitate to reach out for advice or ask about opportunities. You know, get your name out there. Use LinkedIn. You know, you can connect with people who have the job you want and ask them how they got there. You know, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. So yeah, some different ideas there. Really quickly, so in the next few days, I'm going to send you a resource pack full of different resources and useful guides and things like that. I'm just going to briefly explain what you can expect. So on the left, you may have heard of some of these job websites. It's definitely worth signing up to those mailing lists so you can get regular updates on upcoming jobs. You can also filter jobs by sector, by level, and area of the UK. So these are all really great ones, and they're how a lot of us found our jobs that we're in today. You could take the green skills quiz to find out what green careers are suited to your skill set, which could be fun. There are also plenty of free online courses available through some of these platforms, which are great. You know, doing extra learning is a good way to demonstrate to future employers that you're genuinely passionate about the field and willing to invest your own time to develop it further. Other things you can do, as Rachael mentioned, you could sign up to the Wild Network, which I would highly recommend, to get lots of free training and workshops to help you upskill. So recently, this year, we've done things like meadow creation workshops, guided bat walks, guided fungi walks, wildlife photography, things like that. So it's a really good thing to be a part of. And we're also on Facebook at Cheshire's Wild Network. We'll also be sending you some videos and blogs about trainees at different wildlife trusts to give you a bit of an insight in like what you can expect, as well as some engagement stories, because of course there are so many engagement roles at the trust. Maybe you don't have a degree in ecology, but you're a really good communicator or a people person, and you want to use your skill set to help raise awareness and build nature connection. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the presentation. It's been amazing hearing so many different stories, which is fantastic. And it just goes to show there's so many ways to get involved in different things. So we're now going to have a Q&A. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions in the Q&A tab. I'm going to try and get through as many of these as possible, but please continue adding more. Maybe we could add some afterwards. So I'm just going to read one that someone put in the chat. So Erin said, most jobs are asking for over 2 years experience. How are we meant to compete with that if we are changing careers or fresh out of education? I've been self-employed for the last 6 years. What can I do in regards to professional references? I think that's a really good question. And Emily, I know you've answered that in the chat, but would you like to elaborate a little bit more to everyone else?
Yeah, sure. So I've done a brief answer in the chat. My recommendation for references would be to contact the people that you've been working with. So I know you're self-employed, but do you work with suppliers? Do you collaborate with people? Is your service something that you offer to businesses or members of the public? Could you get someone that you've interacted with on a professional level to write you a reference? It might be classified as a personal reference, but I think if you explain that you're self-employed and that this is your source of referees, I think that would be acceptable from most employers. In terms of the experience, as long as you can address all of the essential, or as many as possible of the essential criteria within a job advert, that shows that you have the experience. So as a few of us have said tonight, many of those skills are transferable skills, not sector specific skills. So as long as you feel confident in writing a personal statement that showcases that you have all those skills and that you would feel confident interviewing for that role, and having enough examples, then that's kind of what they mean by experience. If you can prove those skills, then you have the experience.
Go on, Joe, what do you want to say?
Yeah, can I just add and echo Emily's point there in terms of like it's all about what you can state you can do against those descriptions, and that classifies as your experience and your qualification, because if you've done it, you're qualified to do it. But to kind of like end on to make a negative but turn it into a positive point is, I completely agree with you. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's been a problem that subsisted within the sector, and it maybe is in other sectors as well, of asking for ridiculous levels of experience and knowledge for someone who's an early career starter and stuff and things like that. But what I will say is that is changing, because there are people within the sector, within our HR teams and young staff members who are telling other people in positions of power to change this, that is not fair and equitable, and it's certainly a role that I play within our Wildlife Trust movement as well, and that's for things like, even as I think I saw something before about asking for degrees and things like that, where instead of saying you have to have this, you have to have 2 years, you have to have a degree, it's do you have this, or do you have this, or do you have this, to try and make it more a fairer playing ground.
Amazing. Thank you both. That's brilliant. And yeah, I would just again echo that when I first joined my traineeship, it asked for 2 years, at least 2 years experience, and I only had 1, and I applied for it anyway, because I think women in general are far more likely to apply for jobs unless they meet every single criteria. So yeah, I'd say just apply for it anyway. But yeah, brilliant. Okay, next question from the chat. Andrea asks, are there any particular skill deficits in the conservation sector or any emerging areas to be aware of? Who would like to have a go at that? Joe, go for it.
I am conscious of not hogging, so apologies, but yeah, I would I feel like I'll reference a couple. I particularly work in the science and evidence, and a lot of that is GIS, which is spatial mapping things, which has become a big thing over the last 5 years. It was kind of only slightly referenced when I was doing at university, and now it's huge in university degrees. So a lot of people who are in those relevant degrees will be getting a lot of skills, and it's something that's required. And also particularly for the Wildlife Trust, but I think, again, as I referenced before, there's a lot more interest in the environment politically and beyond. And with our relatively recent CEO of the whole wildlife trust movement, we are becoming a sector that needs to advocate and campaign and maybe kind of do more on that side. So things around like policy and advocacy. So those things are where you're on the trustee boards, or if you can if you can join marches or join local campaigns, such as our like campaign at the Save Danes Moss, an example, and then exemplify the work you've done to support that kind of advocacy policy work. If you can showcase where you've spoken to your MP about a water issue or something like that, a water quality issue, those kind of things are seen more and more important now. So then the skills that are related to that in terms of being able to advocate and communicate with decision makers and things will come about as well. So I think they're emerging.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. Emily, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just from my perspective, because I do both communications and behavior change campaigns, I think behavior change campaigns are a big expanding area now. So you know, communicating to people how their daily lives and their kind of their daily lives can both negatively and positively impact their local environment. So for instance, our Clean Water Initiative looks at missed connections in people's homes. So when they've had renovations, kitchens and bathrooms added, the pipes have been misconnected, and that water is going into our rivers and our estuaries. So things like that, that it's not just the standard communications jobs anymore of writing newsletters and doing social media and building websites. It's working with people, and that links with psychology and all of those other areas. So again, great for people looking for a career change.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. I think if people are happy to just hang about for an extra 10 minutes, there's some fantastic questions that it'd be really nice to get through if everyone's happy waiting. So next question, what is the best way to get connections with people? I live in the south and I go to uni in the north, so I'm struggling to build connections in the south. Does anyone want to have a go at that? Don't all jump at once. Emily, go for it.
I'm going to give the example of the Wild Network. So look into community groups, networks that are already existing. So for instance, here at Cheshire Wildlife Trust, we have a local wildlife group called Wirral Wildlife. They're incredibly active and they do a lot of great work, and they're heavily linked with Cheshire Wildlife Trust, so you get the support of the Wildlife Trust, but it's a voluntary thing. Look out for partnership projects like the Audi Estuary project. We have at the peak of the project we had about 8 different volunteer roles, but also we had networking events and things like that that we did as part of the project too. So I would say trawl social media looking for local things that are happening, and also LinkedIn as well for voluntary positions. I'm seeing so many more voluntary positions being advertised on there, and networking events as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emily. Alex, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, so as a southerner myself and now living in Chester, how hard it is to build that network up. But I've been hopping around for the last couple of years to different areas and different zoos, but social media is a really, really useful tool. You can pretty much type into Facebook, and if you type in things like wildlife club or Bristol or Wildlife Club Manchester, something will probably come up, and a lot of the times they'll hold get to know you sessions or welcome sessions, and I've been to several of those. Having lived down in Cornwall, I went to a few of those, the Wildlife Trust, some done by the RSPB, but they are there, and if they're not done in person, a lot of times they're done through webinars, and they'll have these Q&As, and you can start building those relationships through events like these. So there are lots of different things out there, but if there's any sort of free groups, try and join as many as possible without becoming too overwhelming that you can't keep up with everything. But if there are areas that you know that you want to go and work in or want to move to, potentially to start work, do try and join those. So I am a member of the Wildlife Trust, and I also think I support, I think, 3 of them, just because of the different areas I've moved to. But it does give me a bit of an insight into other organisation and events that are going on.
Brilliant. Yeah, just those like virtual connections are so important. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. That's brilliant. Next question. Are there any plans for a webinar like this based on the variety of different career paths available in this sector? I don't have any background in ecology, conservation, science, but I'm keen to learn more about how to get into the sector and how many skills and experience could be of use. I might just have a quick go at this because we have considered doing more webinars like this. If people find it interesting, please like reach out to us and tell us if there's specific job roles you're interested in hearing about. Let us know. I think after this webinar, we'll be sending you a survey. So let us know your thoughts, because if you're interested in some of the more like desk-based roles, or like the roles that maybe you don't need an ecology degree for, you know, there's nothing to say we can't do another webinar like this, but based on those kind of job roles. So definitely anything with the Wild Network, it's very much you tell us what you're interested in and we will put events on based on that. It's not a we assume you want this, it's you tell us. So the more you tell us what you want, the more we might be able to do it. So another message that was actually in the chat from Amir: what should I do if I have the correct experience but not the relevant education? Many times UK zoos or wildlife parks reject me. Is it necessary to have the relevant education? Who would like to answer that? Alex, yeah.
Short answer, no. There's plenty of people who work at Chester Zoo that come from a variety of backgrounds. We've got some people who were teachers, but that doesn't always have to be that they focused on biology or geography. We've got English teachers, we've got geography teachers. We even have someone who studied drama and was an actress, but they were able to take a script, learn, say all the different facts about wildlife, present it really, really well, and that makes a fantastic educator. And we've got so many other people who've come from different roles. We've currently got someone in art, got a background in IT and maintenance, but came through a different internship scheme that we had going at the time, and they're now on our education teams. And again, that's just one team I'm mentioning, but I do know that we have, I think it's now over 1,000 employees at max at Chester Zoo, and that's sort of the height of summer. So we have loads of different people coming from different backgrounds, but even getting, you know, one job in an organization can open doors into other pathways that you might be interested in. So I say I wouldn't, you know, let it stop you. You can learn a huge amount online as well. So I'm always trying to build my own knowledge, my own experience. COVID was a pretty horrible time, but I did use that time to try and go on as many online courses as possible. And that has really opened some doors to me after COVID has finished, as much as I can say that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. Joe, did you want to contribute?
I mean, Alex was made the first point I was going to make about like there's plenty of courses out there and a lot of them are free. So again, it's more stuff to do in your spare time. But if you're specific about the things, the skills you know you need to develop, and it obviously gives you kind of like a certificate or something to state at the end. But obviously education comes in different formats, doesn't it? And again, whether it be kind of through volunteering opportunities, and with certain organisations they might put you on something if you're a volunteer, and again you might have something that to show from that. But I say education comes in different formats, and even kind of you know, learning from someone, finding a connection within you know, volunteering roles or community groups, and then learning from them. And it's not going to give you a badge, but again, you can talk about knowledge gain in a different way.
Absolutely. And yeah, we'll be sending all those resources I mentioned earlier. So yeah, there's plenty of other ways you can educate yourself. Thank you very much. I think we've got time for one last question. So this is from Liv. I have had a few interviews and their feedback consisted of why I was so great and such a strong candidate, but someone was just better, or I had bad luck. What is your advice on this when the interviewers are not saying what you actually did wrong? Starting to lose hope. I have applied for so many jobs and only received 2 interviews with the same feedback of being unlucky. Should we have one person to answer that, and then I think we'll call it a day? Go on, Jay. Thanks.
I can go, but again, I've answered a few. So does anyone else? No. Okay. It's a particular thing close to my heart, that, and I've seen another mention in the Q&A or the chat about someone becoming despondent. I think the answer to it is I can't wave a magic wand. I think the answer to it is like it's a fact. It's so difficult. We've all been there. But I guess I can offer some hope in the sense of I managed to achieve my first career in conservation in terms of the UK, the Shropshire Wildlife Trust, and it was the last job I was ever going to apply to, because I got to that stage of like, if I don't get this, I'm not doing it. And so it requires resilience. It requires you to pick up and go. The fact that you're asked, and on regards to the feedback element, it's kind of a truth, in the sense of they might not actually be disclosed, not withholding things to you. It might just simply be the case that you are absolutely incredible, but there was just someone who was just slightly more incredible than you. And again, I've had many that feedback and found that so frustrating. So I think my biggest tip on that is, it's an old cliche, but it's not what you know, it's who you know. So if you can find an organization that you want to work in, and you can get through volunteering or whatever it is, and you can get a person and get your name with a person, then that person will talk internally, and that would give you that might give you that slight edge, that even though you might not be just not quite as good as that other person, but you're known and you're liked by the organization, and that might get you the foot in the door.
Really good advice. Yeah, it's who you know, not what you know sometimes. And we've got people in the chat agreeing with this person, saying I've also had exactly the same experience. Emily, go on, final thoughts.
Yeah, just quickly, I have said this in the chat, but maybe contact recruitment agencies and talk to them about interviewing, and ask them like what employers are looking for. The other thing I've said is practice interviews with friends and family. So I am the really annoying person who asks my friends and family to, read all my cover letters, and practice interviews with me, practice presentations, because, even though it's not as as realistic as what it's going to be like in the interview, the more you do it, the more that muscle memory will sink in, and the less nervous you'll be, and that will help you come across as the best you can be in that situation at the time.
Yeah, just practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect. Brilliant. Thank you all so much. I think that's all we've got time for. So I just want to say a huge thank you for you all taking the time to come this evening and get involved with the Q&A, with the chat. A massive thank you to our amazing panel. If we could have a virtual round of applause, I don't know, for taking the time this evening to share their wisdom and experiences. And as I mentioned at the start, once you've got into conservation, you just so want to help others do the same, because it's such a rewarding and incredible industry that we need now more than ever. And yeah, if you're trying to get into it and struggling, just keep at it, because it is worth it, I promise. Please keep an eye on your emails for a resource pack and a quick survey in the next few days. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. So thank you very much.